So I know some of you, in fact, I've heard from a couple people already who are waiting for my Sinners review. That is coming. I've seen the movie a number of times now, and obviously I have a lot of things to say, and I'm hoping to get the maestro back on for a conversation about the movie as well. So on top of my review, there will be hopefully a two-person conversation. One of those viewings, the maestro and I went to go see it. So we both had a lot to say, and I'm looking forward to that. But today, I wanted to talk about something that I hadn't really discussed on this channel at all. That movie I want to discuss today is Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Let's do it. You might have known that Episode 3 made a return to theaters this weekend for one day only, at least around here. I'm not quite sure what other theaters did, but my understanding is that it was for one night only to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the release of Episode 3. It seemed like it came out of nowhere, but then not. And I realized I hadn't really discussed earnestly any Star Wars movies on this channel, and I thought, what the heck? So I went to go see it, and I have some thoughts now that I've seen it more recently. First of all, it's still a strong movie. I think it's a strong movie, regardless of what you think about George Lucas and the prequel films. And you might have a lot of things you think about those films, and not all of them good. That aside, this is a strong movie, and it's certainly the strongest movie in the trilogy. And I think it deserves some credit. There's two things I think you need to know about me and Star Wars. Yes, I'm a fan, but I'm what's called a late fan. I'd known about Star Wars growing up. In fact, I had some bed sheets from the original Star Wars trilogy. Had never seen any of the movies, and I played. There was a Super Nintendo trilogy series that came out. I played those games. That was great, and I really enjoyed those games. But I was not a hardcore fan. Hadn't really watched a Star Wars movie until college. It was when I watched my first earnest, full, beginning to end Star Wars picture, which was The Empire Strikes Back. So my dad used to work. He had many of you know, he had a barbershop building, and then when he lost that, he transitioned into barbershop trailer, and at one point it was at the local flea market, and he knew this guy who had a bunch of VHS tapes, who he would get tapes from. And the guy would sell a bunch of like DVDs, videos, whatever. So Dad had a box. He ended up buying some tapes from this dude. We had a lot of movies anyway, but at that stage, we weren't watching as many of the VHSs that we'd had previously. And at some point, he had this box, and my brothers and I, we'd gone through the box and started picking out what movies to watch one day. And one day I found Empire Strikes Back and put it on, and I was like, oh, this movie actually is pretty tight. This is a good movie. And watched Return of the Jedi next. Unfortunately, that box did not include the original Star Wars, so it wasn't there. But Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi were pretty cool. They were cool enough to where, I didn't really need the original Star Wars really at that time. But that started my earnest appreciation for Star Wars. From there, obviously the prequel movies were out already at that time, or at least the first two were. Watched those, and Episode 3 came out at a time, I think I was nearing the end of my college years. In fact, I remember very distinctly, it was school was out, or it was nearing the end of finals was coming. It was almost out, and my brother-in-law, we went to go see Episode 3 in the Camera 12 Cinemas, formerly Camera 12 Cinemas, downtown San Jose, which used to be also a United Artists Theater. It was a great theater. It's a shame that the building is there, but I don't know what they're turning it into now, but it was cool to have a nice movie house downtown. We could just go, if you're on a walk somewhere, you decide, oh, it's 2:30, I'm gonna go see this movie, just roll in there and watch a movie. So I missed that. But Episode 3 was showing there. Opening night, we went see the movie. We all enjoyed it. It was great. And since then, it's been one of the movies I've watched more often. Between that and Empire Strikes Back, I think from the both trilogies to watch. When it came down to getting special editions or different versions of the movies, it came down to it wasn't really a difficult choice. You get Empire Strikes Back special edition, whatever version, and you get Revenge of the Sith special edition version, and that was really all I needed. Never mind, I did have a box set or two of the original the original trilogy, and had collected the prequel trilogy separately on DVD. So yeah, I was a fan of those movies. I started playing some of the later games pre-Disney purchase, before Disney bought Lucasfilm and all the different things under the Lucasfilm, LucasArts umbrella. That's The Force Unleashed. It's an amazing game. Still, to this day, I think one of the best Star Wars games. To say nothing of Jedi Academy and some of the other, even Fallen Order and some of the more recent Star Wars games. Those are solid games too. But so yeah, I'm in it. I'm into the Star Wars juice. But Revenge of the Sith is a special case. But if I look just at the prequel films, I think most people will agree that Revenge of the Sith is the strongest of those three movies. I've never been one to bash George Lucas for his choices, because at the end of the day, the older I get and the more I think about those movies, I can appreciate how singular his vision was, regardless of what you think about the dialogue and whatever plot things that don't make as much sense or whatever it is. He had a clear vision of the story he was telling, and doggone it, he was going to tell that story regardless of what anybody else said. And I respect the heck out of that. So I never hated him for even things that I might not be a huge fan of. Probably some of the dialogue is the only thing that you might laugh at or whatever it is. But when I think about this is what happened. My recent watch. When I think about it now, it was interesting hearing some of the parts of the dialogue that I thought were funny, like unintentionally funny, when I used to watch it before. Watching it this time, I took a minute to actually really mull over the lines and go, well, I guess I could see how it could make sense. What helped it make more sense is if you look at one point, I can't remember the interview, George Lucas had talked about Star Wars being a story for kids, kids who are like around 12 years old or whatever it is. And when I looked at it from that perspective, if I was a 12-year-old making up a story like Star Wars, it might have felt like that. It might have felt the dialogue meaning. Because I thought back to myself as when I was 12 years old and used to wrote a lot of comics and wrote dialogue for stuff. And when I look back now, it feels like that. It feels like I laugh at that stuff, but I'm going, oh, but as a 12-year-old, that makes a certain degree of sense with whatever you think, whatever your knowledge is at that time, all of your influences from the stuff that you've watched and the stuff you've heard from different people, parents, other grown-ups in your life, whatever, and how they talk about conflict and how they talk about romance and all those things that when you're 12 sound kind of laughable. Like you're in the ways that you're imagining yourself as an adult in these situations, and it's funny to look back at some of that stuff. And so when I thought about episode 3 from that perspective, as if a 12-year-old wrote it, which doesn't negate it, doesn't mean it's whack because let's say a 12-year-old did write it. That doesn't mean it's bad. It just means it's not for you. It's not for that audience. And I think if Star Wars is for, at least the prequel and sequel movies are for youngish audiences. I think with the exception of Empire Strikes Back and Revenge of the Sith are darker movies, decidedly, in both trilogies. That said, 12 years old is still old enough to be introduced to some of that. Like if you can get through the original Star Wars and how terrifying Darth Vader is, it's kind of scary for younger kids. When you're 12, you may not be as scared, but he's still intimidating. You're uncomfortable when you think about Darth Vader in the shadows. So I think, when you think about that, the dialogue and stuff is not as bad. One of the things I've talked about with other fans of Star Wars and fans of this movie was the fact that Anakin Skywalker's turn to the dark side might not have felt as organic and felt maybe rushed. Having seen it again this time, I don't know that I agree. I think that the film was well over 2 hours, and it's paced solidly enough. The points that are in there about his turn that make him turn, that lead to his turning, there's not a lot of them, but it's actually, when you break it down, it's just, look, he's worried about Padme. He doesn't want her to die, so we're going to do whatever it takes to make sure she doesn't die. If it means he has to turn to the dark side to do that, that's what it is. It feels gradual to me. I don't, not everyone's going to agree with that, but I think it feels gradual enough to where it's not super like the first scene he's normal and then the next scene he turns to the dark side. I think the movie does a good job at pacing his, because that's what's happening. This is a movie where the end and where Anakin's going, and knowing that going in, when you think about the pacing of it, I feel like it feels like it happens at more or less the right time. There's enough time for Anakin to have turned to the dark side, live in his choices as a Sith Lord, and then have to then take the next step, which is to do battle with his former master. And the drama is rich enough, and the tension is strong enough that you could forgive any other prior missteps to that. The other thing, when you consider the lightsaber battle between Obi-Wan and Anakin, the other complaint, or the other issue I had, here's the one thing that I can say that was a definitive question mark for me, was the fact that the lightsaber duel, not so much that it went from place to place, it wasn't like stationary. It wasn't like in the same place. It did a lot of movements and stuff from different places, was the fact that it was intercut with the battle between Master Yoda and Emperor Palpatine. I guess looking back, though, I feel like where else would you have done that? Something about it logically, the movie would have been much longer, I guess, if you would have spaced out those two fights. It makes sense. I just feel like I would have wanted to have that fight be unbroken. If you have Anakin and Obi-Wan doing battle, that's the focus. It's like when I think about, actually, that was intercut too, now that I'm thinking about it. The episode 1 fight between Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon Jinn, and Darth Maul. There were a lot of spaced out fights, spaced out things in that. I mean, whatever. That's one thing I would change. I would if it were me, I would have Anakin and Obi-Wan fight and not have that be broken. Just have that just a straight up, just fight. But aside from that, I don't know what more you want. I think if you're looking at it like an allegory or like a Greek tragedy, which I think is probably the best way to look at it. It's like Shakespeare. One of the things I can appreciate now is that Hayden Christensen seems to be finally appreciated for his presence in the Star Wars universe. Now, I'm not a fan of it. I'm not a fan of the way he came back into the fold and all of that, like necessarily, because I think there could have been stronger ways to do it. But the fact that he is here, he is in the mix, and he seems to be he's being accepted now, is kind of cool, because he was one of the main problems, I think, about the prequel trilogy. Not to me, but I feel like this was something that a lot of people talked about. I'd had many conversations with several friends about the prequel films, and Hayden Christensen was one of the issues that I've heard tossed around about these movies. And the point I tried to make had to do with, if you think he's not great in episode 2, do you believe that he's improved in episode 3? And most of the times I've gotten a yes to that question, but there's still been more or less the decision or the opinion that Hayden Christensen was miscast. Say what you will, but I think Hayden Christensen is fine. I think it's great. If there's an issue at all, it's the script. So I think people are not really upset. My feeling is that the disapproval of Christensen in those two movies has more to do with the writing and perhaps the editing too, than his performance. Not that there isn't anything about his performance that's questionable, because there might very well be. Personally, though, it never registered to me on the radar of whether or not, that's why I was always so surprised when I heard it from other people. In fact, I thought it was funny to hear some of my friends critique Christensen's performance. But personally, he was fine to me. Cool stuff. Obviously, top of that list is John Williams' amazing score. You can say this, look, you already know what time it is. If you hear that name, John Williams, the man has scored some of the most legendary films. You know, everything from Hook to Harry Potter to Jaws, E.T., Home Alone, to even the NBC nightly news theme. That's the one, I don't know how many people know this. One of the NBC network news themes, I think it was a morning one or an evening one. John Williams composed that, and it's great. If you get a chance, look it up, because look up the full version, because it's pretty awesome. It's pretty tight. Like, look it up. So yeah, music is at the top of the list. Cool things about this movie. And the next is Ewan McGregor. He's, regardless of what you think about him in his personal life, he is a fantastic Obi-Wan Kenobi. Like, I don't know that anyone could have. There would have been some decent Obi-Wans for the prequel trilogy, but Ewan McGregor really, he's consistent throughout all three movies. And if you've watched the Obi-Wan Kenobi Disney Plus show, he's great in that. In fact, I think he's the best thing about that show. McGregor is excellent throughout, and really is genuine. And I'm just a fan. I'm a fan of his performance in these movies. And he really does, I think, really great work. And really, like, for what the script is, McGregor actually, but I also think he has his character is stronger, just as a whole. When you've looked at his arc through the three movies, and it's unfortunate that Anakin's situation is a little bit more mixed, because you had the first movie he was so young. But just because it's at one point that kid is going to turn into Darth Vader, but there isn't a lot of stuff there suggested. There's actually nothing sprinkled in that movie to give us a sense of his eventual turn. I think it would have helped to have little kid Anakin have little nuggets of the potential to turn to the dark side, which by the time you get to episode 2 and 3, it feels more planted. You could do it in one movie, which I think this movie essentially does. But I think you also have, like, the added seasoning of episode 2, where you have that big moment with the Tusken Raiders. That's a pretty clear example of the doors wide open to step through to go to the dark side. He's dipped into the dark side at that stage. So, but that aside, McGregor, the character, seems like the backbone of that character is so strong. All McGregor had to do was just imbue him with some sincerity, and it works. And I think for the most part, the movie as a whole is earnest, regardless of what you think about the individual characters. And then, of course, Ian McDiarmid is great as Palpatine. You got people like Jimmy Smits, Samuel L. Jackson. Obviously, Mace Windu is a gangster. You gotta mention that. Yeah, dude. And the action sequences actually are pretty good. They're like really good action sequences. You could say what you will about, again, Lucas as a director, but I think he directed the heck out of those action sequences and the mix of practical and computer generated effects. Remember, Lucas was at the forefront. He was one of the people at the forefront of the digital movement when things were going digital. and being able to incorporate a lot of the computer generated elements to live action stuff. People were doing that, but there was a real pioneering approach to the development of this of newer technology to better realize the vision that he had. I think overall, but particularly for the action sequence, because there was so much happening. You had to deal with the clones, you had spaceships, you had non-existent other like ground vehicles to deal with, laser, shots and stuff. All kinds of stuff was jumping off, and on planets that didn't exist. So you had a whole bunch of variables to negotiate with the different pieces. And I think for the most part, they realized and rendered pretty well. And from a narrative standpoint, I think one of the things for me personally that I've always been, in fact, I was hesitant to watch this time because I remember every time I watch it, there's the emotions hit when you know the inevitable clash in that third act is going to happen between Anakin and Obi-Wan. You know this about me now. I'm not afraid to be emotional, and I'm not going to tell a lie that the dialogue, whatever, but and even in that, because when they're talking, there's a sequence. The last time Obi-Wan sees Anakin before that fight, they're on good terms, and it's actually a very sweet conversation. Anakin's being honest about his feelings, about how frustrated he's been with the council, and Obi-Wan is genuinely listening to him, and then he is very sweet to him. He's like, "Yo, man, look, I'm proud of you. You're a great Jedi. It's gonna be all right. You're gonna be a master pretty soon. Don't worry about it. It's cool." And then they separate, and it's actually really sweet. And so when they meet again, they're enemies. And actually, it sucks. It's like, oh man, they fudged, dude. Like, oh man. And then they got to fight too. It's like, oh gosh. And you can see the pain. This is the other thing I think why McGregor is so great, because you see he plays it so well. The disbelief when he sees the security holodecks of what Anakin's done, and then the sadness, and then the pain, and then also the realization that he's going to have to fight this dude, and that it's going to be a hard fight. It's not going to be an easy battle because Anakin is so strong. And now he's giving himself over fully to the dark side. And that's not good. That's another layer of like, it's going to be really difficult for Obi-Wan to succeed. And McGregor plays it so well. It's just, it's perfect. Man. And it makes me sad to see. And I noticed myself getting really focused in. Once the lightsabers come out, now you're focused. You want to just like, all right, let's get it. Now I'm here. Let's watch this fight. Let's get into the. And it's much the same way I feel like at the episode 1, the Darth Maul fight. I didn't feel it too much in episode 2 with the Dooku battle, but it serves a similar purpose. But really, episode 1 and episode 3 have those fights that make you just go, let's see what this is about. But if you haven't seen episode 3 in a while, you might give it a look. If you're not a Star Wars fan, then it's not going to do anything for you. But if you're open to Star Wars at all, and you're even a light fan, check it out, because it's pretty decent. It's pretty good. Still, I think it holds up. The emotions are still riveting. It feels very much alive still. And it's interesting too to watch it now in the Disney era of Star Wars stuff, where things feel so inconsistent now with the property. And to say nothing of, like, we know there are some good things that came out of it, like The Mandalorian, particularly the first 2 seasons. The first season for sure is A+. That first season is really strong. And then you have things like Andor, of course, which is amazing. There's a handful of things that within the Star Wars property under the Disney banner that is actually good. But I think to watch episode 3 now and remember what it was like when there was so few Star Wars media, like outside of the games and books and comic books and things, with regard to the movies and TV shows. There wasn't that much out there. You only had the movies. And I'm taken back to a time when Star Wars felt special. And these days it's feeling less special. And I think what helps, obviously coming across good things that come out in recent years that can help it feel a little bit more special again. But I think still George Lucas's movies are still, to me anyway, still special. And they will hold a place in my heart. When I look at it from that perspective, it helps Star Wars feel cool and less, less oversaturated, I guess. But give episode 3 a shot again if you haven't seen it in a while, and come on back. We've got more reviews coming. Sinners is coming up. I've got a couple other movies that I've seen that I want to talk about that I'm excited to get out here for you guys to see. But thank you for taking the time to watch this video. All right, it's time for me to get out of here. Take it easy, and I'll see you in the next one.